Ladies and gentlemen, I think the actual conflict between Iran and Israel has shown something really, really seriously wrong with the ANC. And I'm at the point now where I am willing to say the ANC cannot be saved. They are just too retarded. And we really need to talk about just how retarded they really are. But before we do, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It does help grow those numbers. So let's actually look at what exactly I'm saying is retarded. And this is the news that the spokesperson for the ANC tweeted a whole "we stand with Iran" type bull rubbish. And this is in relation to a protest that occurred in Cape Town at the weekend.
Others, for God, for giving us this opportunity to work in shared grief for the people of Gaza. This walk was a reminder to ourselves.
But here's the problem. One of the flags in the actual protest was Hezbollah. Yes, Hezbollah. That's a terrorist organization. A terrorist organization that kills its own people indiscriminately. But you see, the ANC moron wouldn't know that, would they? Because as far as they're concerned, they're just like standing with Gaza, and Palestine, and Iran. You know, the poor, marginal, oppressed. But they actually seem to have zero idea as to what exactly they are standing up for. And who exactly is these people that they supposedly are retweeting in solidarity with. This is an ongoing problem now with the ANC. And this is exactly why I say they are retarded. As far as I'm concerned, the United States at this point in time should just consider the ANC as a lost cause, as supporters of terrorism, and just go from there. That's my suggestion. Do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Now let's actually take this whole Iranian thing one step further. And this is the news at the weekend that the Justice Minister, Mbalula, questioned the legality around the international law of Israel's preemptive strike on Iran. Now one must be reminded that Israel frequently has rockets fired at it by Hezbollah, Houthis, Palestinians, you name it, Gazans. They have rockets getting fired at it on a daily basis. Much of this comes from Iran. Iran funds it directly. And a lot of the rockets are aimed not at strategic infrastructure like military compounds. They're aimed at civilian sectors. They want to cause the most amount of death to civilians. Mbalula questions how Israel can use the anticipatory self-defense criteria. Because according to him, underneath the UN Charter and customary international law, well, according to him, he says he can't. He says that he questions whether Israel's actions can truly be justified under any of those conditions. And he emphasized that a preemptive military action must be justified by necessity and proportionality, criteria which he suggests Israel may not have met. Now, this is really interesting because Israel has targeted strategic infrastructure. They've targeted nuclear power stations, scientists, and key leaders in the Revolutionary Guard. They have avoided all forms of civilian areas, something that Iran has not. But this isn't to debate whether or not Israel or Iran are on the right. In fact, what we really need to do is consider South Africa's approach to Russia. Now, for those of you who don't know, I was one of the first to interview the Russian ambassador to South Africa, so I'm not actually here to criticize what Russia did. But what I am here to do is to contrast the position, the principles that South Africa adopted in relation to Russia and what are those same principles, whether they've applied them to, say, Israel. Now, you will recall that South Africa, in relation to Russia, suggested that it would be abstaining from any forms of UN votes condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And again, if we look at the reason that Russia invaded Ukraine, it was on the basis of a preemptive strike. So it's basically the same kind of thing as Israel's done, because their preemptive strike was on the basis that Ukraine was due to join NATO, which would put a NATO stronghold on their borders. But in actual fact, Israel had been having its sovereignty called into question for a very long time by Iran, with parties held bent on destruction of Israel being directly funded by Iran. So actually, if you think about it, Israel has a much greater reason to do this than Russia did, because Russia wasn't having missile strikes being sent into Russia, now was it? But in any case, we're reminded that when it came through to the forms of negotiation, Ramaphosa's regime said that he would invite Zelensky and Putin to engage in negotiations. They would use the G20 in order to have diplomacy. He continued to maintain military operations with Russia, specifically via arms trades and naval exercises. You recall that South Africa did naval exercises with Russia and China, much to the Americans' dismay post the invasion. Now, a lot of this was done under the idea that they were all just supporting each other because they're BRICS parties. So they invoked the idea of the BRICS foreign policy identity. And quite often they would highlight their historic debt to Russia because it's a support from apartheid. But the double standards are just obvious for everybody to see, because South Africa criticizes Israel's use of this idea of the preemptive strike, the anticipatory self-defense. They suggest that that's not okay. But the legality of Russia's invasion, well, that's open to question. Yeah, that's fine. All whilst we suggest that we're non-aligned, that we should be taking a mediation-focused foreign policy. But I'm reminded that South Africa cut off all forms of diplomatic engagement with Israel when it engaged in its military campaign with Gaza. There is no mediation going on with Israel. South Africa cut all diplomatic ties. The double standards are just palpable. And it's obvious to everybody to see. Now, one could question why this is, as some have suggested that South Africa, specifically the ANC, are possibly a little bit miffed, because this may mean that if the regime in Iran changes, the ANC may, allegedly, lose its funding mechanism, with suggestions that obviously the current regime send money to South Africa, and that money trail would find itself all drying up. You can let me know what you think of that suggestion in the comment section below. But what we do know at the moment is that Iran has responded to the military strikes against it by launching 150 ballistic missiles, over 100 plus drones, all targeting Israel in what they're calling Operation True Promise 3. And this has led to Israeli casualties, with people in residential buildings, specifically in areas such as Haifa and Tel Aviv, being killed. In any case, at this point in time, America appears to be sending a lot of the military hardware to Israel, which they are using for the military campaign against Tehran. But America, under Donald Trump, has said that they're unwilling to actually get involved. So they're not going to be sending troops on the ground. But you see, this whole kind of double standard of everything that we see with the South African government, specifically the ANC, is just becoming all too frequent now. Let us use the second news story of today, and that is this whole idea of the national dialogue. Now, reports are that up to 1 billion rand may be used for the national dialogue. And many individuals are now starting to criticize this proposed national dialogue as a giant talking shop, a distraction from urgent issues such as crime, corruption, failing criminal justice system. We all know what the problem in South Africa is. The problem is that there's no accountable leadership and no judicial enforcement. And you see, what the whole thing, the national dialogue, is attempting to do is to shift the accountability to someone else. And again, that's one of the criticisms of the national dialogue that I've been talking about, because I can see that what it will be is will just be a talking shop to blame apartheid, blame white monopoly capital, blame land ownership patterns or some bollocks that the ANC thinks is somehow relevant. And it's becoming interesting because the Steve Biko Foundation at the weekend said, well, yes, it's 700 million that is currently being earmarked for it, but democracy is not cheap and we need it. We need it. Yeah, because you see, democracy, according to them, is under threat in South Africa. And the only way in order to safeguard democracy is to bring together government, business, labor, civil society, and forge this new social compact. Not social contract. So whoever says that in my comment section below, shut up. They all talk about social compacts. This is what the Ramaphosa regime thinks is the most important thing in the world. social compacts. What exactly does that mean? Freak, I don't know. It's just more bull rubbish. You see, the problem is that the reason democracy in South Africa is under threat isn't because parties are not engaging. It's because the government is openly hostile to the citizens of the state, considering the citizens of the state to be nothing more than a meal ticket. We've heard at frequent points various ANC ministers telling the members of the state to shut up. They've told them that they're not accountable to them. They've told them that they want centralized control in the same fashion as they have centralized control in North Korea. They want the same levels of centralism. Yes, this is why democracy is under threat, because these clowns in the ANC have put it under threat. And yet their answer to fixing it is spending nearly R1 billion. 700 million currently earmarked could increase to R1 billion. This is stupid. These people are retarded. They are absolutely retarded. They seem to think that funding 700 million for workshops, community dialogues, media campaigns, travel expenses. I mean, this after the deputy president has just been criticized for his travel expenses. Because in typical fashion, he went over to Japan, which South Africa doesn't really do a lot of business with. Went there and he used astronomical costs for a nice little jolly and a party. But again, we're told that the costs are justified. Because democracy requires an investment? Forget talking shops. You know what you need to do? Hold government accountable. Get your ministers to recognize that they're not overlords, they're not kings, they're not tribal chiefs of the nation. They're servants of the nation. They need to do what's best for the nation. Do that. And then people might actually have some faith in democracy. But when they see politicians, and they saw this through the Zondo Commission, billions spent on Zondo. How many of them went to prison? Like no one. No one got charged. And any of the charges that did occur were all dropped because the evidence was rubbish. Or the way that it was approached was rubbish. So the Steve Biko Foundation says, we need to despair with the current state of democracy because if it continues like this, apparently it's going to decline. We're on a ticking time bomb, they say. We need to have responsive democracy. But this is the problem in South Africa. The reason it's declined is because democracy has moved away from any form of principle and is based to nothing more than majoritarian rule. They go, well, the majority want us to do this. We got the numbers. So we'll do whatever we want. Doesn't matter if the principle's there or not. Doesn't matter if South Africa is principle. Doesn't even matter if they understand what a principle is, which we saw in the first news article. They don't have a principle to stand on. They're all like, yeah, Gaza, Palestine. But they have no idea what they're supporting. Yeah, we support Russia because of a historical debt. I'm uninterested in the merits of the conflict. I'm interested in the arguments used by the ANC government to justify its policy positions. And the reality is, it's all bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. These people are cooked in the head. They just seem to just talk complete rubbish. And maybe the actual real problem is that the reason they can talk this rubbish is because the public is just not educated enough to understand that they're just talking complete garbage. How can you say, I support Gaza, Iran, yeah. Iran subjugates its people. They're not the good guys. They're seriously not the good guys. And to retweet and say you're supporting Gaza, but actually you're retweeting Hezbollah flags. Are you cooked? Are you like mental? But you see, they wouldn't know the difference, would they? They just go, Islamic protest. Yeah, I like that one. Again, these guys are cooked. And I'll bring you the final news story, the very final news story of today. And this is the news story that Mbalula has slammed. I don't know why the media love to use this word slammed, as if it means anything. It's the stupidest word ever. Slammed. Mbalula's criticized AFRIFORUM for basically their criminal complaint against him. Now, the criminal complaint being pushed forward is in relation to defamatory statements. Now, for those of you who don't know, AFRIFORUM at the moment is on a bit of a mission. Wherever you criticize AFRIFORUM in a way that they think is libelous or defamatory, they go after you legally, and to be frank, they should. So they say that in many instances, what Mbalula have done is he's violated the Intimidation Act. He's also violated the Cyber Crimes Act. And so they've laid a private case through the Afroforum Private Prosecution Unit, which handles criminal cases on behalf of, well, Afroforum-led cases of interest. Well, according to Mbalula, he says that Afroforum's actions are disingenuous and politically motivated, says the political stuntman himself. Every single thing that the ANC does is politically motivated. It's there to do forms of grandstanding. And what exactly did Mbalula accuse Afroforum of? Yeah, engaging in political grandstanding. Under the guise of justice, he says. But that's exactly what you clowns do all the freaking time. And according to them, Mbalula says that these charges are just an ANC-centered political stunt aimed at undermining the party. Dude, you don't need to undermine the party. You do it just fine yourself. You don't need Afroforum to undermine you clowns, because you're all a bunch of clowns. Civil society as a whole no longer looks at the ANC in a positive light. No one in the state looks at the ANC in a positive light, which is exactly why the ANC's numbers are in rapid decline. The ANC is a clown party. But that's my views. Do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until tomorrow, bye.
White man just posted a meat on the fire video, headline, "Charcoal and whiteness flamed the flame of oppression."
Ronaldo posted another YouTube rant about the ANC.
We didn't even watch it, bro. But I heard so. Like, obviously fascist.
We must correct this disinformation. The ANC didn't steal 4 billion, they misplaced 3.9.
We're live in Johannesburg, where hundreds have gathered for what authorities are calling a peaceful protest.
Another Afrikaner family just left for Texas smiling like it's the rapture. Fine. Get that woman from Sunnyside. I want her filming TikToks tonight saying America smells like bleach and depression.
In a bold step against disinformation, tweeting about government corruption is now officially classified as racist.
They're posting poolside videos in Texas like apartheid never happened. I want names, locations. I want their bank statements on the homepage.
Remember, poverty is a Western narrative, potholes build resilience, and corruption is just wealth redistribution with extra steps. Good night, South Africa.
It's not a safe place. People are leaving London, they're leaving the country. I walk on the pavement now close to the building to reduce the risk of a cyclist coming up and trying to nick my phone. And in certain areas now, I won't use it. And I'm now genuinely looking at buying a strap so that it's much harder to nick out your hand. Knife crime is off the dial. We've got a knife crime epidemic, a machete epidemic, and you've got to clamp down really hard. It's the only way.
The city of Birmingham will not tolerate the disrespect of our Prophet, peace be upon him, and there will be outcomes from your actions. You will have repercussions for your actions. We have been trained from birth that we must defend the honor of our Prophet, and we will lay our life on the line.
Okay, you know, the other argument is, okay, so if you don't like it here, go to your own country.
But why would we do that when our forefathers were instrumental in rebuilding this country after World War II? It was our grandfathers who worked in the factories 20 hours. It was our grandfathers who came here and run the infrastructure. It was our grandfathers who bought you the lovely curry, which is your national dish. So how can you tell us to go? We're not going nowhere. We are here to stay. Like I say, we're not here to take part. We're here to take over.
I
love that.
choose to wear this, I choose to wear that.
You and I will have
You
to...
look naked on the street.
Do I look naked? Do I really? I don't look naked.
Who are you trying to seduce?
No one's trying to seduce me, and I'm not trying to seduce anyone. You shouldn't judge me how I try not to judge you.